What? No, Jesus. Whatever. I've heard some things, but I've not confirmed them, so I'm not gonna even. I'm not gonna even. Yeah, only 10% of the aid so far. So there are two topics here. One is that President Zelensky is pretty angry at the fact that the West has given zero response basically to Russia's deployment of North Korean troops for the war. Basically, just a slap on the wrist. Oh, no, no, you better not do it. You better not use North Korean troops. Um, and just angry statements, angry warnings. Nothing comes of it. Zero reaction, which is becoming a standard for um, the West at this point. But the more frustrating aspect is, and it actually ties to different topics, the 10% aid thing actually it sort of, even if it's not just 10%, the way aid is being handled directly links into the other important topic, which is Ukrainian conscription. People not wanting to enlist into the military in Ukraine, which is uh, a huge topic of discussion as well. That many people in Ukraine currently just don't want to go to the military. They don't want to enlist, and there's one of the big reasons for that. A pretty important reason for that is that people are afraid that they will enlist to the army, they will be sent to the front, and they will simply not have anything to fight with, or the armored vehicles that they will be placed in will be paper thin, and they will just go out there to die. They will have either horrible equipment or no equipment, and they will just go to the front lines to die in a trench. That is the fear that many Ukrainian people have. And the news of Ukraine receiving just 10% of US aid, I would say, just increases that fear tenfold at least. Like, it's a very reasonable fear considering just how the aid has been uh, handled, you know? The US has transferred nearly 10% of aid approved by Congress in April 2024 to Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky said at press conference on October 30th. 10%. After months of political infighting and worsening situation on the battlefield, the US House of Representatives finally passed the foreign aid package on April 20th, which included 60.84 billion in support for Ukraine. You do your job, you count on reserves, you count on special brigades, you count on such equipment, and if you get 10% of all the package that has already been voted on, it's not funny, said Zelensky. If you give your word, you have to keep it, he added, noting that Ukraine had planned its military actions relying on the promised assistance at a certain time. Timing is one of the most important. There are two things that are crucial in these sort of things: timing and also the quantity of aid, right? If you send aid weeks, months, or even more later than the aid was supposed to arrive, then that creates a situation in which, first of all, in the meantime, the Ukrainian forces will suffer losses because of the lack of that equipment. And moreover, the other side, the Russian side, will have ample of time to prepare itself to counter the weapons that will arrive. Of course, the more time passes between the promising of certain types of weapons and then arriving on the front line, the more time Russian forces have time to adapt to that certain type of weaponry. It's I would think that it's pretty basic, no? I would think that it's not rocket science to sort of be able to come to that conclusion, to figure that sort of thing out. No? Is that not the case? Is that no? Zelensky also said NATO was not ready to take specific steps towards Ukraine's membership due to Russian aggression, but the alliance had promised to provide 6 or 7 air defense systems to protect Ukraine's airspace and just has not delivered on that promise, of course. I remember the thing as it was happening. Europe promised certain anti-air systems, but they have not materialized. But today we have not received this number. If we still haven't received it and we can't count on this great support for air defense during the heating season, which has already begun in Ukraine, what can we do? The US recently allocated a new military assistance package for Ukraine worth 400 million, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced during his visit to Kyiv on October 21st. Austin arrived in Kyiv unexpectedly to discuss further support as the US presidential election draws near. Concerns are growing that if Republican nominee and former President Donald Trump wins against Democratic challenger Vice President Kamala Harris, he may withdraw or reduce US support for Ukraine, potentially forcing the country into painful concessions. Despite US assistance, Russian forces continue grinding forward in eastern Ukraine, while the country braces for renewed strikes against its energy grid as winter approaches. And it's just a compounding problem. It's just a compounding problem that a lot of it is unfortunately caused by lack of adequate aid. And of course, there are problems that are pretty Ukraine specific, the lack of building adequate fortifications in certain areas, especially after the fall of certain cities. Ukrainian forces do not prepare adequate defenses further down the line to stop the Russian forces, which is, of course, on the Ukrainian side to handle that. But there are many, many, many problems that come down to inadequate aid. Because even if those fortifications were made, let's say hypothetically, what if there were not enough equipment to defend it? To defend those fortifications. It's just the Ukrainian front line is pretty long. 10%. That is such a ridiculous number. Like, I just cannot believe that it's just 10%. Just shocking. 10%. Ridiculous. And the year is basically almost over. The year is basically over. So what are we supposed to do with this? What are we supposed to even do? What are we even supposed to do?